This is Show Up as a Leader, a show from People Forward Network, helping you maximize your positive impact on the world by becoming your best, fully authentic self. Hey everyone, it is Rosie. You are going to want to probably listen to this conversation more than once. This is a repeat guest, someone who I just treasure, Tim Lupinacci. He is amazing. He is the CEO and chair of one of the 100 largest law firms, Baker Donaldson, and he was a guest couple of years ago and had him back. He has a lot going on. He has a new book you're going to want to get called Everybody Leads. He's launched a podcast called Everybody Leads and a nonprofit called Everybody Leads. There is a theme here, and he very much leads in a way where you do not have to have that title or role. And he just gives very practical and simple steps that we all can take to be more effective leaders in our lives. You're going to want to listen for he has created an acronym for the word courage and how he breaks that down and how that shows up. He talks about owning and being aware of our leadership aroma. And one of the things that I really appreciate we talked about later in the conversation was thinking about when things are overwhelming and in this VUCA world, can we just focus on taking the next right step? Whether you're going through something personally or professionally, whether you're trying to level up your leadership, whether you consider yourself a leader or not, everybody leads. And there's just a lot of richness in this conversation that you're going to want to jot down notes and probably listen to more than once. And again, make sure you get his book as well. Take a listen. Tim, I am so excited to have you back on the show. I was like, oh, here we go. I love it when I get repeat guests.
Well, Rosie, I'm so thrilled to be here. You know, I love you, love all you're doing. And so it's just a real joy to, be able to talk some more about leadership.
I know. We're going to have a geek out session. These are my favorite conversations. So you have been up to quite a lot since we last chatted. So you've launched your own podcast called Everybody Leads. You've launched a nonprofit called Everybody Leads. And of course, we're going to geek out about your new book, Everybody Leads, How You Lead and Why It Matters. So just congrats. Like, you've been on fire.
Oh, no. Well, I appreciate that. And obviously, I'm not that creative because they're all called the same thing. But
you know what? It's good branding. It's good branding.
Right.
And I have to say, you have some pretty heavy hitters that wrote excerpts or, reviews for your book. So, like, way to go, man. That's awesome.
I'm really honored and humbled. I mean, I've gotten to know some folks and they've been very generous. You know how it is because you've written books, you reach out and say, hey, do you have a minute to look at this? Be honored. And then I really was overwhelmed with that. So yeah, it's been exciting to that journey of, while I've got a full-time job, right? So that's my hobby, right?
Well, exactly. Well, we're going to talk about that, right? So here's the thing is I remember when we first had our conversation, I don't remember, was it now a year and a half ago, whenever it was. And the first thing I was just super excited about is you view leadership, hence the Everybody Leads name, very much like we do, that it is not about a title or a role, and that we all have an opportunity. And I am so bold as to say a responsibility in this day and age to show up as leaders in our lives. And I know that you're bringing that mindset now more formally out into your orbit via all of these amazing platforms and the way that you're expanding beyond your day job. So we're going to totally dig into that. And so besides that, the other thing that I really appreciate, there's a lot of things I appreciate about you, but the other thing I really appreciate is the fact that you recognize that this journey of leadership isn't done. Too often I see formal leaders get to a point where I've been leading so long, especially if I'm a CEO. I mean, people listening, Tim is the CEO and chair of one of the 100 largest law firms in the country. And we get to a point where, oh, I'm done, or I'm beyond development, or I don't need that anymore. And newsflash, as a human being, we always need to work on ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I just appreciate that you are modeling that and leading that and advocating for that, because I do think that some people just, they miss out and they're not as effective as they could be in their lives because they think somehow they've quote unquote arrived and they're done.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's like, I mean, I have this sort of internal mantra about I want to get better every day and I want to learn every day. And our colleagues, as you said, like we all have influence, whether we have a title or not, we're influencing others and people are looking at us. And I've got to be curious and keep learning and keep getting better because I keep making mistakes too. I got to figure out, well, how do I avoid this in the future, right?
Yeah, you're not perfect.
That's right. The other thing that I think is that's helped me is sometimes, particularly early on when I said, I was challenged that I need to step up in leadership. And I was like, what does leadership mean? And I need to go spend 2 weeks off on the mountaintop figuring out leadership, right? Or read, a dozen books a month to figure it out. And it's really I've found it's in those daily disciplines of 10, 15, 20 minutes, whether it's listening to a podcast like yours or reading a book or going to a conference or YouTube videos. I mean, it's ubiquitous now where you can get really good content that just feeds your soul, but also makes you start thinking and be curious. And so it can be done in just think about 10, 15 minutes a day for a year, investing in yourself by just reading some resources about leadership and how you can get better. It's going to play huge dividends in your life.
Yeah, well, and I love that you break it down to something small because people can think, oh, it's overwhelming. And it's like, oh, I got to go spend 2 weeks on a mountaintop. Well, guess what? And we talk about this in our work, that kind of like intensive, like one and done doesn't work anyway. I mean, it's good to jumpstart something, like go to a 2-day offsite or a 1-day offsite. I know we're going to be doing some work together. It's like, yeah, jumpstart stuff, but you have to have that sprinkle, that ongoing, and it doesn't have to be overwhelming. So I love that you like, come on, like do just something every day to invest in your leadership. I love that. So back up. I mean, you talked about a little bit about you made mistakes and whatnot. What has led you to be so passionate about this lifelong journey of leadership and equipping everybody to lead?
Yeah, and I may have talked about some last time, but I had a boss. It was the first year of my legal career. I didn't have any family members who were lawyers. I kind of backed into the legal profession just because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And now I'm working at this firm, and I really didn't know, like, is this what I want to do my whole life? I felt a little bit stuck. And I was really doing projects very transactionally. I'd show up every day, do my project, turn it in, go to the next project, go home and forget about it. And I messed up a huge project for my boss, who was he was a yeller. He was one of those bosses, you've had them that just were very gruff, no feedback, just get it done and going to yell at you if you did something wrong. And I got paged to his office about this project I had done. And you knew you never want to get paged to Bob's office. And I walk in and I realize there's a dozen people talking on the loudspeaker of his speakerphone to him. He's yelling at them. They're yelling at him. And then he turns his ire to me and says, I realized pretty quickly I'd messed up this big project to tune of overcounting about $2 million of claims. It's in a bankruptcy case. But it was a big matter. It was a big deal. And he yells at me and says, this idiot's going to stay here all night to get it fixed. And so I'm not saying that was good leadership.
Yes, people do not repeat that. No.
That's right. But immediately I'm thinking, one, it's going to be a long night. And two, this is my last night of my career because I'm going to get fired. And I had drawn the short straw to pick him up to head to court the next morning. And there was a very awkward silence in the car. And he did apologize. He said, I shouldn't have yelled at you in front of other people, but I see such potential in you and your career to really step up as a leader and to own what you're doing and not just look at it like you're going to get something done and expect someone else to fix it. And so that I recall was the first time someone really spoke into me that I was a leader. And I didn't have a title. I had one of the smallest offices in the firm. I had no authority, no power. And I thought, well, if I'm a leader, what does that mean? And how can I get better at it? And that literally led me on this lifelong journey of, as we talked about, this, how can I get better? At the time, I think John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership was a bestseller. So I literally wandered into a bookstore, and that was on the front part of the bookstore. So I bought it and started reading it and figuring out how does that apply to my life. And that's led me on this journey. So, but I enjoy it. I enjoy getting to know, learn more, and then find out how that can apply to my own journey and how I can help our organization get better.
I love that on many levels. I don't love that you got yelled at, but so often our greatest learning and growth moments in our life come from something crappy, right? So like an example of what not to do. But the other thing in all of that is somebody seeing something in us that plants a seed and says, I see potential in you. I believe in you. I see you as a leader, and how critical that is that we do that for other people. I mean, if you're a parent, I do that for my kid. Like, there's a lot of parallels between parenting and leadership. I think we've talked about that before, but I love that from that situation that could have been career ending for you, it was actually the spark of this journey that you've been on. That's amazing.
And I appreciate that. And that's another one of those things. I guess maybe because it's so complex of a world out there, and maybe because I've gotten older, it's like I've got to get very simple on things. And so I'm really into this idea of like micro concepts, micro resilience, or micro gratitude. But just think about that. It was really one sentence, a couple sentences that he spoke into me. He didn't have to plan and put on his calendar an hour to go encourage Tim to be a leader. It just happened in those few moments. And I know we talked about, there's a couple examples in the book of people who literally a few words of someone saying, I believe in you, or I see some potential in you to do this career, literally changes people's lives. And sometimes it's just a couple words. And so I think you're right. It's so important for us as leaders to just think about that in our daily interactions with people, to encourage people, when we see things in them, I mean, not to make up stuff, certainly, but I totally agree with what you said, Rosie. We have a responsibility, again, whether you have a title or not, to speak into other people and encourage them along the way. So, yeah, totally agree with you.
Well, yeah, and as you say that, what reminds me, just because I'm knee deep in the data, we're in editing of our next book, Future Proofing Leadership, but it's really disheartening when you start to look at the data out there of looking at, one study has that 40% of current leaders are considering abandoning it altogether. And then when they look at Gen Zs, like globally, over half of Gen Zs are like, oh, hell no, I'm not going into leadership, because they see how it's been done, how it's unsustainable in terms of the stress and the burnout, et cetera. And if this is the trajectory that we are going on from a formal leadership standpoint, that's pretty sad and scary. And not everyone needs to be a formal leader, obviously, but organizations are going to be kind of hurting if people don't want to. But at the same time, then it's okay, if you have this large percentage of people that perhaps view leadership as a formal role and are saying, oh, not for me, stay far, far away. I'll just stay in my little individual contributor role, which is fine. But if they don't see themselves as a leader, there are other ways you can lead and not have that stress. And again, hopefully we can change the culture around leadership where it isn't that, but there's a lot of opportunity to shift a mindset that is unfortunately growing around that leadership maybe isn't worth it, or I can kind of be hands off, not my problem, apathetic, because someone else can step up and lead. And this fast-paced world is not going to get us where we need to go if that mindset remains pervasive and we don't do something to actively shift the mindset, because it doesn't shift on its own.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And, I know you look at this and the research shows, about the importance, if you are in that role, or if you have aspirations to move to a role with a big title, about the self-care and taking care of yourself to avoid that burnout and to avoid that. But, you said something really important, Rosie, about even if your aspirations is to be more of a quote unquote contributor, how can you show up as that best contributor on your team? And that's leadership. Liz Wiseman has a great book on impact players and this idea. And again, with a lot of research behind it, we all know those people on our teams who may not, have a formal title, but they're huge contributors. They step up, they have impact beyond their even job title and the description. So I guess encouragement to those of you listening who, have no aspirations to be, big leadership title, but you can show up and be your best leader in what you're doing and what that role is along the way. But totally agree with you.
100%. Well, so we're gonna dig into that a little bit. So one of the things I have to say that I appreciate about just how your book is segmented is just what we were talking about. You segment it by leading yourself, which again, you don't have to have a title or role to do that, and leading others. And again, you can lead and influence others without also having that title or role. And what I like about that is it's very much the way we look at it, because you have to lead yourself before you can lead others. And when we do this, we draw off the incredible work of Bob Anderson and Bill Adams from the Leadership Circle. So they talk about the inner game of leadership and the outer game of leadership. So the inner game is all of that messy stuff that we got to work on. It's our mindset, it's our self-awareness, it's our emotional intelligence, it's our identity, our meaning making, all of that stuff that is messy, that leads to head trash and self-limiting stories and beliefs and just behaviors and habits that get in our way more than we realize. And then the outer game is all of the stuff that are also critically important. It's goal setting, it's strategy, it is how you interact with other people, it's how you communicate, it's how you listen, it's all of those things. And so I want to talk about the leading self part. So when it comes to leading yourself, you talk a lot in the book about having these daily practices. You'd kind of mentioned a few, but what are some of those that you find most helpful, and how can people leverage them?
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those, what I've learned through trial and error, right? Because I know when I'm not focusing on myself and taking care of myself, then I get tired, I get stressed, I sometimes get irritable, and things like that. So for me, I need to make sure that I'm building in time. I try to every morning of having some, reading time, some reflecting time, some journaling, and then trying to get outside and walking or running, a sort of that exercise movement. And those are ones that I really try to make that very disciplined in a daily basis. We mentioned I got home really late last night from a flight that was delayed, but this morning when I woke up, I was like, oh, I want to sleep another half an hour. No, you need to get up and do your daily disciplines, because I've got a lot to show up and do, be my best person today. So those are something, and again, I don't have 2 hours that I do that. It's just small points of time in the morning to help me get going. And then I try to build in some other things, again, from the failure of the past, I need some downtime off of my emails, right? Because it's a 24/7 world. Everyone's demanding you all the time, and they want answers, yesterday. And so I've worked in trying to do a weekly, I call it like a 24-hour digital Sabbath, where I'm getting off email, getting off social media for at least 24 hours over the weekend. Now, our executive team knows that they can text me, and I keep the text, being the noise on. So if I hear something, okay, well, maybe I've got to jump into emergency. And not everyone can do it for 24 hours. Some people, you may just be able to say, I'm going to try to shut off my emails and not look at my phone after 7 o'clock at night or before 7 o'clock in the morning. So I really just try to be intentional about building in things that fill me up, get me encouraged, trying to get sleep and exercise and eating well. And there's nothing new about this stuff. It's really, you got to be intentional about focusing on it. And, some people may say I'm boring because I'm falling asleep at 9 o'clock at night, but I'm getting up at like 4:30 and I'm getting going into my day. So those are some things that have worked for me. But like you said, Rosie, everyone's got to figure out what works for them in their journey.
Well, and I love that, we have an exercise that we do a lot with groups we work with that is super simple and it's along that lines, but it's called Ingredients to Be My Best. And we basically ask people, think about, describe yourself when you're at your best. Like, I'm at my best when I've had a good night's sleep. I'm at my best when I've journaled in the morning. I've had this quiet time. I'm at my best when I have some, digital downtime, whatever it is. So you list kind of like when you're at your best, what feeds into that? And then think about it like a recipe. What are the ingredients that increase the likelihood that that version of you can show up? To your point, intentionality. I need to communicate with my team if it's an emergency, but otherwise I'm shutting down my computer. Or I have one leader that in his organization, it is just, trying to find the boundaries around that because we're trying to shift the culture. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to try this and he started little micro practices. So when I get home, I'm going to literally put my phone like in a bin for the first 2 hours when I'm home so I can actually be present with my family. And then if I need to pop on it later or, and I've found that you have to revisit it regularly because in certain seasons of your life, you need different things or like, you know what? Maybe you were a morning person and now things have shifted and now you're working globally and now you've got to do stuff later in the day or whatever it is, but it's not static either. And so I think revisiting that to go in this season of my life, what else do I need? Or is there something new I need? Or do I need to rethink that maybe I don't have 15 minutes, I only have 5, but that's better than nothing. And what's the most critical for the 5 minutes that I have or whatever it is. So I love everything about that because you're right. When you said it takes intentionality, it does. And otherwise we get swept up in the autopilot of our brains and autopilot of our life. And that rarely serves us or other people well.
No, that's right. Well, and I love that you said that, Rosie, because sometimes I don't even think about it, but you're right. Things have to ebb and flow with what's going on in your life. And right now, our COO and I are on a tour of our 24 offices. We're calling it a summer road trip, and we've got T-shirts and all the dates are on the back. And it's a lot of fun, but, we're doing like an office, 2 presentations, a social event, and getting to the next office. And so it's just a lot of travel, including some travel on Sundays. And so I'm not off of the digital on Sundays because I'm having to make sure, we're connecting, get all this stuff. So you just have to do what you can. And, I may not get out and walk, 4 miles when I'm going full blown to a new office and then we're driving at night to get to the next city or flying, but then I can do 2 miles or 1.5 miles. And at least that's getting some movement. So I'm trying to do, and you're right, you have to shift. Another thing you said, Rosie, that's really interesting because for us as leaders, I think the unintended consequences of things we're doing. Saturday mornings are kind of a really refreshing time to me of catching up, of thinking about things, of like vision casting. And because I get out and do a little bit of a longer run, my family sleeps in a little bit later on Saturdays and I'm up early still. And so I can get a lot done. And oftentimes I realized, this is about a year ago, I was pushing out a lot of emails to our team because I was having these ideas. Oh, let's do this, let's do that. Well, then that was happening, and I didn't even think about this. They felt like they needed to reply to me on the weekend, which was not the case at all. That worked for me. I didn't, and so I've had to readjust that. Either you can schedule your emails to go like Monday morning.
And it wasn't that magical. Just schedule it. Don't send it. You can write it, but don't schedule it.
And I didn't even think about it, right? So it is thinking. It's not only taking care of yourself, but then that gets in a little bit about making sure you're not intruding on others with a sense that I had no intention that they felt urgency to get this responded to Tim, because then by midday Saturday, I'm shutting down. I'm not looking at it anyway.
Well, and I also appreciate that realization because so often I will say, particularly CEOs and anyone in the C-suite or executive suite that we work with, I find myself regularly having a conversation with them of you need to understand the weight and the influence that your actions and your words carry, even though you think of yourself as, and some people are like, well, I've grown up in this business, so they still think of themselves as like the intern from 20 years ago. But I'm like, when you're in the room, you carry weight. So you taking time to connect with people, even if you're more introverted and more task focused, that speaks volumes to them in terms of how much they're valued. You being mindful of, if you're always the first to speak, mindful of how you send your emails, just your energy is contagious, period. But particularly when you get to a certain level at an organization, it is like even more contagious, and that can be a good contagious. Like calm and like balance and harmony, or that can be a not so good contagious that is anxiousness, stress, burnout, etc. And I think when we don't own and honor the impact that we have of people around us, or like I'll just like do a parallel with healthcare, because there's a lot of parallels. And I always say to every physician that we coach and work with, it doesn't matter if you have a formal leadership role or not. By definition of you being a physician in the hierarchy of medicine, every time you step into a clinic or step into an operating room, you are viewed as a leader. And how you show up profoundly matters and sets the tone for that day. Similar, when you look at the lawyers, versus the legal clerks, paralegals, etc. By definition, the hierarchy that is within law firms, they are viewed as a leader, whether they have a formal leadership role or not. And I think sometimes people don't think that about themselves, so they don't pay attention like they need to on the shadow that they cast or the bright light that they cast. Like, what are you casting around you? What is that energy? What are you saying to people just by how you show up? And I think a lot of people miss that opportunity to really understand that, be aware of it, and own it, quite frankly.
Yeah, Rosie, it's so true. And that's one of the things that was a real challenge for me 6 years ago when I moved into this role, because I'm just Tim. Y'all have seen me around here, but then realizing that I'll say something, and then, a couple months later, someone said, well, Tim said this, so that must be important to what I'm trying to do. And it was just like a throwaway line, right? It is pretty remarkable. And that's one of the things while we've doing the summer tour, in addition to doing some presentations, we're quote unquote, walking the halls, sitting in people's offices, and really trying to just listen and figure out how can we get better? How can we help you on your journey to have remove obstacles? You're in the trenches every day. We're not. What are some challenges you have? Then it starts back in the morning in that journaling when I've been on this tour of like, how can I have the most impact on our firm today? What are some things I can do to add the most value? And like yesterday, I was in Orlando. Yesterday morning, I said, okay, my biggest impact for Baker Donaldson today is to be fully engaged with our colleagues there, like 20, 25 people, and to just, not look at email all day and just listen. And certainly give ideas if I have them. But like you said, Rosie, just show up and listen. And then the other thing that, again, should be encouraging to anyone maybe don't have that title. As you said, I mean, people still look to you and how you show up, even if you don't have that title. And how are you leading in what you're doing every day? I'm getting an opportunity to speak to a group of guys who have come out of prison. They're kind of re-entered into life. And one of the things I want to challenge them about is that the folks that they were, friends with back in prison are looking at them and how they're showing up now on the outside, and how are they able to take whatever, lessons they've learned. They've turned the corner from mistakes in the past. They've got a huge responsibility on them to their family, but I want to make sure they're thinking like there's guys back at prison looking at them, and they don't have any fancy title, and they're just trying to get by. Some of them are still trying to find a job, right? But so you're right. We all can influence others by how we show up and how the words we say, and it really does matter.
I love that. I love all that intentionality. All right, so I'm going to dig into your book a little more. I'm like, I have all these notes. I'm like, oh my God. And so in chapter 4, you address the importance of how we face setbacks by having a growth mindset. Love Carol Dweck's work. And you specifically address building resilience in chapter 7. So I love that they play off of each other. And why I love both of these chapters in particular so much is that when we sign up to be a courageous leader in our lives, we are going to fall down. Like you said, you learn from the mistakes. I mean, we learn the most from it. And if we expect we're not going to, that's problematic. And at the same time, we have to then know how to get back up. And I would say, especially as more native digitals enter the workforce, it's super critical that we start to build that and start to develop that in them, because it's lacking a bit. And so talk to me about some of the key practices you have found to be most effective to kind of create that bounce or ability to learn from our mistakes and not get stuck in setbacks from our mistakes.
I think it's a muscle that we have to learn. And I feel like I've gotten better at it, but I've got a long way to go to really do it, because, when you have the moment of that setback, it's challenging. When I was practicing law full time, you'd get a bad court ruling, and sometimes nothing to do with what you did or didn't do. It was just the judge felt a certain way. And then, my immediate response is like, oh gosh, how am I going to tell this to the client? What am I going to do? But then it's like, okay, well, I've got to help navigate them through what the next step is. This setback happened. What did we learn from that? What did we learn in that case? What did the judge say? And then how do we move forward? So I try to bring that into my life as in leadership. And really I think it's time of reflection. What can I learn from this? Why did this go wrong? What didn't I consider? Did I not get enough buy-in from people? Was I not self-aware enough to know that this was going to fall flat? Was I not getting feedback? And then what can I learn? And then what's the plan moving forward? A more recent example in leadership, our last fiscal year, we came through and we had a record year, but we didn't quite hit our plan. And it'd been the first time that we'd had 4 or 5 record years, and we'd hit plan. This year we didn't hit plan. So I was like, okay, what was that gap? So I literally got a whiteboard, got into a conference room, sat down and went through, okay, what were things that I could have done better last year, and think about that. And then I went back and looked at a lot of the resources that have always been important to me, like Jim Collins' work and some other real good leadership sources, and say, okay, let me think about this and then come up with a plan to drive forward for the next year. And so I think it's reflection, it's building a plan, and then it's executing on it. And I think it's discussing it with colleagues. Sometimes I think we feel like I've got to know all the answers, but really talking through it and thinking through it. Another thing that a few months ago, we do an annual engagement survey, and it was really nice. It was good record scores on engagement, but there's a lot of places where people can write, comments and criticisms. And there was some real criticisms about how our communication maybe wasn't landing. And of course, my immediate reaction is, we're communicating all the time. Y'all aren't reading it, right?
Oh my God, that's what I hear all the time from y'all.
Yeah, just read the emails. It's all in there, right? We told you this. But then I had to step back and say, okay, it's not connecting with them. And it's a responsibility on my part. I've got to make sure I'm delivering communication that people in the format that they process it and they can understand it and own it. And so that led me to say, okay, well, let's step back. What is our communication plan? How can we get better at that? I'm pretty verbose sometimes in my email. So, looking at a book called Smart Brevity about how to really distill it down and really come up with a plan. So, it's a little bit of rambling there, but I think it all boils down to, reflecting on the mistake. What are the lessons I can learn? Developing a plan to make sure it doesn't happen again, and then keep moving forward. And then once you've done that, there's a little story. I don't know if you probably never, it's a pretty bad movie, but there's a movie in the 70s called Gumball Rally, and it was a cross-country road race, and they teamed up in pairs, and one of the drivers was an Italian driver played by Raul Julia, and his partner got into the car, and Raul, in a little Italian accent, said, "The first rule of Italian driving," and he rips off the rearview mirror of the car and throws it out the window and says, "What's behind me doesn't matter, only what's ahead." So I think that's also important. Once you've done that process and you have a plan, you're moving forward and you've learned from it, then you got to rip that, rearview mirror off and throw it out the window, and don't let those voices, keep beating into you that, no, you're going to mess up again, that kind of stuff, and really trying to control that. So those are some tips and things that I've done to try to navigate failures.
I love that. Well, and I think a lot of that is super important. Like, even just going back to your engagement survey, it's so funny how we have a culture survey. Again, communication always comes up. And what I typically see happen is there is a bit of brushing it off. Like, they say, what more could they possibly want? Well, it's not our fault. They just don't read the emails or whatever it might be. And I think part of it is, and I love that you're going around doing this tour. Bob Chapman, the CEO of Barry Wehmiller, is known for doing these listening tours and but understanding really what is going on, what do people need? And going back to my comment about more native digitals entering the workforce, they want bite-size, like it or not, they want, bite-size nuggets, and they need to be communicated with differently. It doesn't mean that they don't need to grow their skills of how to communicate more effectively or absorb communication differently, but it's not a one-size-fits-all. And so when you understand that and go, okay, are there other ways that we can get creative? And whether it's through channels of like, hey, this is something that our leaders are going to be expected to communicate in their team meetings this month or this quarter, or, we do it via video or we do it via bite-sized nuggets or whatnot. But it's finding out, what do people need? And this is like, reminds me of, like, you talk about in the book, your leadership aroma, but it's like, what is that aroma you cast, or what do people need? And it's not, if we're leading others, we're in service of others. It's not about us. It's like, okay, if there's a gap between my intention and impact, if I'm intending to be clear and transparent and the impact is, it's not clear, I can't just blame the other person. So I love, like, even with not meeting plan, that you're like, okay, what was my part in this? And what could I have done differently? So you can't rip off that rearview mirror until you've actually done the reflection and the work. It's not just like, screw it, not my
Yeah.
fault.
Yes. Right. Right. I totally agree. And something I didn't say on that communication aspect is also not just developing a plan and, okay, we can maybe get some external help to say, how can we do this better? And you're exactly right. I think nowadays you see on newspaper articles, whatever, this is a 2-minute read, in the little parentheses. So I've started doing that. This is a 1-minute email, read, but it's letting people know we heard you and this is what we're doing. And that's really some of this tour is talking about, some of the feedback we got and then what are we doing about it? So people know their feedback matters and we're acting on it. But yeah, I love Leadership Aroma is probably my favorite part of that book because it's a concept that a British professor at London School of Economics had this concept. He was originally from Calcutta, India. And he said the only time he gets off from teaching, of course, is the summer. And he goes back to see his family in Calcutta in the summer is, miserable. It's kind of like, a lot of the U.S. right now because it's so hot and humid and everything. And he says, you know how it is when it's that hot. You're lethargic, no energy. You just want to lie around and do nothing. And then he contrasts that with the time he got to teach in southern France for one semester in the spring. And it was around this Fontainebleau forest. And he said, Fontainebleau forest in the spring, you just walk through it. And you have places like that you've been where it's like the breeze, the cool breeze, and the trees are beautiful and the flowers are blooming. And you just have this, pep in your step and you're ready to go conquer the world. And he says, as leaders, how are you showing up as Calcutta in the summer or spring in Fontainebleau forest? And that really struck me because I realized like even I'm, here in my office and I may have a dozen things I'm thinking about, I have to get done. And I'm walking down the hall to get another, glass of water. And I can just have my head down and scowl on my face and going to get the water to get back, shut my door. Or I can walk and really engage with the people that are around us. And I get it. I mean, this is not utopian. You have challenging days and sometimes you are in a rush to get somewhere. But how we show up, and we do have this aroma that people are looking to, and particularly then if you have a title, right? Because as we talked about earlier, they're looking at taking their cues from you. So that's something that's really encouraged me about how I need to show up and that it really does matter how I'm giving off an aroma or how I'm walking down the halls even.
Plus, that hot human doesn't have a very good smelling aroma.
No, that's right. That's right.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about leading self, and we could go on this like forever, but I want to transition a little bit to leading others. So again, for people who are listening, even if you don't formally lead others, you do, right? How you show up for your family, how you show up for your friends, that aroma you cast really does. And again, there's a lot of people that listen to this show that are formal leaders as well. So you have so many great chapters and insights and practices you provide in the section on leading others. And so I want to jump right to chapter 19, because you talk about something that is very near and dear to my heart, which is courageous leadership. Like, we're all about courageous leadership. We have our courageous leadership program. It's like everything. It's my jam. And you have an acronym that you specifically use for courage. Would you walk us through that?
Yeah, sure. And it really grew out of COVID. Early, obviously, in COVID, there was no game plan on how to navigate a worldwide pandemic. And I'd been in my role about 6 months. And I was at the time, I was reading a lot of Churchill. I kind of like him, and I thought that I really was impressed by how even in the midst of insurmountable odds, he remained confident. He remained brutally, true that this were really tough times. But how can I have optimism to drive forward? And so reading that, I just came up with this: I need to lead with courage every day because everyone else is uncertain, like what's going to happen tomorrow. And so I did create this acronym, and the C was confidence, because even though, like I said, we didn't have a game plan or a roadmap on how to deal with it, I needed to be confident in showing up for my colleagues that they could believe in me. Not that I had all the answers, but that we were working on it. And we had to really, dig deep and figure out what the next right step was. But once I did that, I had to be confident and see that I wasn't, freaking out in the face of the unknown and uncertainty. So that was something that really I had to remind myself. The O is out front. I mean, I don't know if you remember Rosie in the pandemic a lot. I mean, I just kind of wanted to hole up in my house and put my head in the sand, like, what in the world's going on in the world? And wait, you said we had to go home for 2 weeks and now it's another month, from the governor's orders and all this stuff. But I realized, again, our people needed to see me out front. So we started doing videos, daily videos, just talking about, some of it was information that we were doing, addressing challenges, and some of it was just trying to encourage others. And I needed to be out front. The use unshakable. We all have setbacks. Again, I got to learn what we talked about. We've got to learn from it. We've got to figure out how to move forward. Things outside our control that could make us have some real challenging times, like the pandemic. I mean, and I still use this acronym today, so it's applicable more than just back then. But how do we stay unshakable? The R, it's kind of funny because I go back and forth between a couple R's that are both important. One is resolve. Once we've figured out that these are the steps, the next right steps we think we should take. We need to be resolved to go ahead and take them. Again, if they're mistakes, then we learn and we pivot and move forward. But the other is resilience, because that's just something that I've continued to, I think all leaders need. Every human needs, because it's just a really challenging time. I think somebody on the internet said this is the year of being tired. And so, we got to be resilient. The A is adaptable. We have things, all of us have things thrown at us every day. Is not anything of our doing, although we have some things that are a result of our actions. But we have to adapt, and we have to think about that. And the world's moving so fast, and new technologies and new everything. And all of us, I think, as humans, I think the research says, we like the status quo. We kind of get comfortable in the status quo.
Yep. We are hardwired for familiarity and comfort, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, because I know you talk about that a lot. But we have to be adaptable. And so that was something I needed to remind myself. The G is growth mindset, as we talked about, that idea compared to a fixed mindset in Carol Dweck's great work. And I had to be constantly thinking about how can we keep growing. And that's particularly been important over the 6 years I've been in the role, because we had really plateaued in a lot of areas before I took the role. Financially, yes, but even engagement and marketplace brand. So we really had to shift to this big growth mindset. And then the E is encouragement. I just wanted to make sure that every day I'm encouraging our colleagues, encouraging that they can do it. And so, again, I remind myself of that each morning. That's one of my daily practices, is the mantra of courage. And that's kind of how I have to show up today, because it doesn't change. All those things are really important. So anyway, that's kind of how I've continued to try to lead in difficult times.
Well, I love that you made it into an acronym, and I love everything about it. And, a lot of the words that you've chosen for the different letters of courage also align with what we know from the skill sets of courage from Brene Brown's work of, like, these are the things that actually build courage. And I would just add on to that the one thing that doesn't fit in the acronym, but that I think you model and is so critical to remember with courage, is that there is no courage without vulnerability. So I love that you're like, made a mistake with the resilience, right? And here we go. How can we learn from it? And being authentic and being human and modeling that, hey, I'm imperfect and let's talk about this and let's learn from it. Because I can see that other people could take the confident. You can be confident from an ego standpoint, or you can have what in the Dare to Lead work, we call it grounded confidence, where you're grounded in your values, you're grounded in curiosity, and you're grounded in vulnerability. And what does grounded confidence look like versus you could have someone who walks in confident and it's more ego. And I would argue they're not actually confidence and overcompensation for insecurity. But I love that you never see that in the legal profession. I'm just kidding.
Right. No. And I'm glad you made that distinction about confidence, particularly because you're right. It can't be ego. It's not about like, oh, I know it all. Now you've thrown down the gauntlet of, I totally agree about vulnerability, and you're right that it kind of threads through all of that. But now I got to figure out an acronym that includes the V.
Courage version 2.0.
That's right.
You got the V.
That's right. I love it. Okay, well, there we go. We should.
There you go. Now you have a
trademark
new acronym. Courage V2 version 2.
Yeah. No, my colleagues know I love acronyms. Just help me to remember things, and so I maybe overuse acronyms here at the firm, but that one just really works for me.
I like it. Well, and then, so speaking of what you're talking about with the uncertainty and acronyms, we use the acronym VUCA to talk, and again, it's not ours, but volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And you talk about this. You talk about in your book, there's this theme about how do we lead others pertains to how well we can navigate uncertainty and disruption and leading through change. And again, that's our jam and what we do every day. So I would love it if you would share what are some of the key things that you've learned from others and also lean on yourself that have been the most helpful in leading through VUCA-ness and leading through uncertainty and change and disruption.
Yeah, well, certainly one thing is get someone like you to come in and speak to your organization. And that's one of the things I talk about, as you were talking about, even the courage acronym. None of these ideas that I come up with are mine. I read and look at research and read great leaders and read Brene Brown. And then how does that apply to our organization? How does it apply to me? So yeah, definitely love getting folks, real strong professionals speaking into me and into our colleagues is important. But there's a thing in the book I talk about that a little bit with the uncertainty is from, because I love all things Disney, from the movie Frozen 2. And I'm a big Disney fan. And Frozen 2 came out, 2019. And of course, everyone knows Frozen 1, Elsa and Anna and, Let It Go and all that stuff. Well, in Frozen 2, Anna, who's the sister, who's not the big princess, she's struggling with some things, trying to figure out her own identity. And she goes off, into the wild and really down on herself. And she sings a song that talks about taking the next right step. That starts out with, I don't know what to do. I'm at wit's end. I think she's on a cliff trying to decide, what am I going to do? And then she said, no, what I need to do is take the next right step. And that's something that's really paid dividends for us here at the firm, is because it is so uncertain and there's so much stuff out of our control. And, a new order gets entered and then it gets appealed. And then we're trying to figure out how to navigate, help our clients navigate uncertainty. And so even though it's a kid song, just thinking about what is the next right step based on everything we know. We got to look at the data. We got to look at what we do know and what we know from the past, get some insights from others, maybe outside the organization. But then once we figure it out, let's take the next right step and really try to do what's in the best interest of our people. And that's kind of how we focus it. And then it was interesting because when you peel back, the songwriters of that song actually talked about a colleague or a friend who was really struggling with depression. And a lot of times, and when you're in that position, as I understand it, like you don't even feel like getting out of bed. So the next right step is to get out of bed. And the next right step is to brush your teeth. And the next right step is to get a cup of coffee. And now you're, further steps into the day. And so that's kind of how I've approached a lot of uncertainty. Because again, for me, I'm pretty simple. I have to break it down into what do I know? What can I understand? And then knowing our people, knowing our clients, this is the next right step for today. And it may change tomorrow. So that's something I've tried to approach in the VUCA moments. But you're right. They just keep increasing.
I do love the simplicity of it because I think, not even just like depression or whatever. I think when people are going through really challenging things in their life that can feel overwhelming, elder care, you have a child going through something, you're going through something, it can feel, oh my gosh, right? And then your brain, because we're hardwired for catastrophizing, I call it the runaway freight train that starts to just go, and it can be paralyzing. So I love coming back to what is the next right step in this moment? What is the next right step today? And it is kind of that old acronym of one step at a time, but there's something to be said for that because otherwise you can't function. And so what is that? What is that? What is that? And then it gives you a little sense of control, but also makes something feel a little bit more manageable. You just break it down into bite-sized steps, bite-sized nuggets. And I think that's brilliant, as simple as it is. I love that you're leveraging that. And again, another great thing from a movie. I love it.
There's a little bit probably too many movie references in the book, but movies speak to me, and like little clips and things like that just really, I think we can then apply in our journey, our life journey and our leadership journey.
I love that. Well, I know we did this before, but who knows if the answers will change or not. It doesn't matter, but people go back and listen to the previous conversation we had with Tim, and also make sure you get the book. But we're gonna flip to, speaking of vulnerability, and you're so great and humble about this. And in the journey you've been on, maybe the story's changed, maybe it's the same, but as you know, I'm obsessed with the messiness of being human, and our head trash gets in our way. So Tim, I would love it if you would share what is a self-limiting story that you still tell yourself sometimes, and what do you do when it shows up so that you can still show up as a leader in your life?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I honestly don't remember what I said last time because I feel like it seems like every other week it's a new self-limiting thing, right?
Yeah.
So it's probably not the same. I still think that law firms, legal profession, very very smart individuals, very high-powered, very confident individuals, and I do have this little nagging thought that, well, they're going to figure out I really don't know what I'm doing in leading the firm. And that they're going to, the gig will be up because we've had some success, but it's like, well, they're going to figure this out that it's nothing that, it's just everyone's doing it and nothing I'm helping and I'm getting in the way. So when that happens, I do have to step back and say, no, okay. And I've talked about this before. Like I go to therapy every like 6-7 weeks and I have that safe space to be able to unpack this when it shows up and when it happens. But I know some of the practices I have to do is just really take that negative soundtrack and replace it with soundtracks of things that are going well and where I'm making an impact in individuals' lives and helping them grow and succeed beyond what they thought they could do. And I have, whenever I get thank you notes, which happens occasionally from colleagues around the firm, just thanking for something I'd helped them with, I keep those in a stack in my desk drawer right here. And if I get into that loop of, am I really the right person to lead the firm, or am I really, able to help continue to drive the growth we're experiencing, and I'm negative on myself, I just read those notes, and that's a way I help encourage myself. So that's something that I struggle with, but then I've got some tools to kind of overcome that and think about some of the real things that we've been able to accomplish. So
I love that. Well, and it's so fascinating, Tim, because I think since we last talked, we finished our research, and that narrative you're talking about is what we call one of our cousin programs, which is the fraud. So it's kind of that imposter. It always goes hand in hand with what we call the counterfeit. So the counterfeit is where it's I'm not good enough, or like there's gonna be something about me that isn't, people aren't going to accept it. But when we have the fraud, it's taken to another level of I'm going to be found out, the gig is up, et cetera. And so one of the things that we talk about of how do you start to upgrade the fraud is borrow somebody's belief in you. So those thank you notes or whatever, it's, like they put you there for a reason. And if you respect them, consider that not honoring that is kind of disrespectful of that person. Or like I said, you're borrowing other people's belief by those notes. I have a folder as well. And I also have one in my email that I call warm fuzzies. And it's like when my head trash is getting the best of me, I'm like, I need someone to remind me that I don't suck today.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah. So, okay. Are you ready to revisit quick questions?
Yes.
Okay. Fill in the blank. Living authentically is.
Wow. Showing up as your true self and warts and all.
Love it. When the world is presenting an opening, but you don't feel like showing up as a leader, what do you do?
I remind myself of another movie reference, All That Jazz, and the main character in the morning, he wakes up and he's just looks in the mirror and he says, "It's showtime, folks." So I just do that. If I don't feel like showing up, I
You
just
do
say,
the hands too? Showtime.
I do. It's showtime, folks. I do the hands.
Oh my God, I love it so much. What is something people would be surprised to know about you?
As much as I love being out there and being with people, I do have some of those introvert tendencies that I need some downtime by myself to reflect and refuel and re-energize.
And see, you tend to that and care for that as one of your ingredients to be your best. So there you go. Okay, so you've been talking a lot of movie references, and I'm going to ask you to pick one. What is your favorite go-to movie?
It's a great question because I'm sure I answered before Citizen Kane, but that's kind of like because I thought that it's just an amazing movie. But my go-to, if I'm really need some pick-me-up, it's Benny and June. It's a kind of a quirky old movie that early, the guy was in Pirates.
Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp, yeah, early Johnny Depp movie. So, yeah.
I love it. All right. What is your go-to song?
How about Imagine Dragons, Whatever It Takes? I'm going to keep leading forward, whatever it takes.
There you go. I like it. What is something you can't live without?
Time with family.
Love it. What is something in your ordinary daily life that makes your heart happy?
The arts, music, creative arts, listen to music, things like that, live music.
Nice. And what are you grateful for right now?
I guess coming on the heels of we finished 21 of our 24 offices, I'm really grateful for our people and that they keep showing up. And so that really fills me up just to be able to walk the halls and see everyone. And it's really good people here at Baker Donaldson.
I love it. Well, and again, it also speaks to your leadership too. So, all right, closing question, Tim. If you could challenge leaders everywhere to practice this one behavior that would create more human workplaces and equip everyone to show up as a leader, what would that be?
I think, again, because this is where I've been the last few weeks, is just listen. Listen to your colleagues and get to know their heart, and then really try to see if there's places you can help them along their journey. So, yeah, just listen and help others.
You'll never go wrong. We all could stand to listen a little bit more deeply and presently and fully to people in our lives. So I love that. Well, Tim, again, congrats on the book. Everybody, we're going to put the link in the show page. Everybody, you need to go get it. Just everything you're doing. Just thank you for modeling. And I'm going to say, in an industry that typically can be more cutthroat and isn't very human and warm and fuzzy at times,
Right. Yeah.
Thank you for modeling what's possible. And it's always such a pleasure to talk with you and to have you on the show. So much gratitude.
Well, Rosie, same here. It's always a joy to talk with you and just to be filled up with all your knowledge and insights. So thank you for having me, and thanks for spending time together.
I'm Rosie Ward, and this is Show Up as a Leader. To learn more, head over to peopleforwardnetwork.com and, of course, hit that follow button.